Schaffer is a boutique firm that helps major companies to drive major transformations and tap into their full potential. One of the things we also do a lot is to write a lot. We put out a lot of industry-leading thought leadership. And today's talk is one of these products that's based on a Forbes blog I've written with my colleague Ron Ashkenaz. So I have spent the last years working on the question of how can we help our companies to continuously reinvent and renew themselves. That's especially important in today's fast-moving, complex, and dynamic environment. So one of the things that are key, that is key for that, is that leaders need to create the conditions where innovation can thrive. I guess you know what's next. Unfortunately, many leaders are not doing a really good job at that, and especially true in mature companies. So I started to look at some pretty unusual places of how we can help them to become much better at their task. And that's why I would like to start my talk today with talking about ants. Ants are fascinating. No matter where you go, you find them everywhere. You find them in parks of megacities, you find them in the woods, you find them in the rainforest, you find them in the desert. Well, actually, the only place where you can't find them is the Antarctica and maybe some remote islands. Well, what's making them such a success story? Well, one of the things they have figured out to do really well as a collective is to search and find new food sources. They are very effective in finding and exploiting new food sources. Well, that's making them so successful that they actually constitute 15 to 25% of all animal biomass on land. Well, all of this is really fascinating, but what has this to do with innovation? The foraging for food of the ants is just like the foraging for new innovations of our companies. In order to survive and thrive in today's competitive, fast-moving and dynamic environment, they are out there trying to find the next innovation. They have to find their next food source. Unfortunately, that's not easy. It's a very hard task. And it is so hard because innovation is ambiguous and a complex task. Many existing companies struggle with that because we don't know where we are going to find the next food source. The only thing we can be sure of is even the best food source will run out of steam at some point. So it's really important they become better at that. And the reason why they are struggling with this is because they are not designed and built for it. Most mature organizations are designed, built, and managed like well-oiled machines. That means linear cause and effect relationship, that means command and control, that also means risk and failure avoidance. Well, all of these things are actually pretty good because they have created quite some wealth for us over the decades. The problem starts when this model of thinking becomes so deeply ingrained that managers start applying it to innovation. That's when managers start putting in place highly determined, highly defined innovation processes. But that's not how innovation works. And that's part of the reason why they're struggling with it. If that's a bad perspective, what is a better one? Well, we actually don't have to look that far because nature has figured it out for us. Nature has created some of the most innovative, adaptive, and resilient things we know out there. The ant colonies are just one example for that. Another one would be the rainforest, the most innovative ecosystem, if you would like. 10 million species and counting. Another one, even closer to us, and probably the most fascinating one, is our very own brain. Our brain allows us to learn, to think, to dream, and yes, also to innovate. Our brain allows us to create these amazing technologies we are enjoying today. Our brain allows us to create this fantastic artwork and music that we are enjoying today. All of these examples have one thing in common. They are not just grounded in nature, they are all what we call complex adaptive systems. Complex adaptive systems do an amazing job with co-evolving, interacting, and adapting to dynamic and changing environments. So let me give you some very basic characteristics of these systems. They consist out of many individual components. These components interact dynamically with each other. In doing so, they follow very simple rules, and they have no central control. But the mix of these things is creating emergence. And emergence are these amazing outcomes and innovations we can enjoy today. Well, here's the good news. Also, organizations are potentially complex adaptive systems. Why potentially? Because we keep treating them like machines. And that's destroying their complex adaptive system nature. So with that in mind, we started to compare the successful against the non-successful innovation teams in several companies across the US and in Europe. And what we found is that truly the most successful teams in our study were working more like complex adaptive systems. But that requires specific conditions that they can do this. And the leaders are the ones who have the most influence over these conditions. And here are the 4 conditions we have found. The first condition is they need to make sure that teams are energized from the very beginning to the end. Complex adaptive systems work best if they are in a specific zone, if they are in a specific state. That means for innovation teams, the members of the team need to be in a zone where they are ready to challenge their existing assumptions, their current thinking, and where they are ready to break open with the existing thought models to create something new. But to move them into this state and keep them in this state, it takes energy. Let me demonstrate real quick what I mean with that. So if this bowl is the innovation space our teams are working in, and this is our team, what happens if we place them in there? Right? Not much. They barely move. That's when you get your incremental innovation. If you want them to be exploring, you have to keep inputting energy so they can keep going to the edges and maybe even beyond. As soon as the energy goes away, well, they keep going for a little while, but it does not take long for them to go back to an equilibrium condition. Well, the other extreme, of course, would be if there's too much energy, that would be chaos. We don't want that either. So what we have learned, where does this energy come from for innovation teams? And what we have seen, there is really an energy mix that's creating this energy for innovation teams. The most successful ones are those that had a high level of passion and excitement for the opportunity they were going after, but they also had a high level of management attention. That does not mean that management gets involved, but it does mean that managers made sure they could work on opportunities the team truly believed in. They made sure they could work on something they were really excited about, and that has a lot to do with how they select the projects. It also means that they empowered their teams to try their own ideas on how they go after these opportunities. Not only this positive type of energy, energy can be also created through urgency. And urgency can be created by managers through finite timelines, by high expectations, stretch goals, and making sure the team gets exposure to real customers and their problems. Very often, and that's what we've seen with the teams that were not doing so well, they make one mistake. We call this fire and forget. That means they show up at the kickoff meeting, they get everybody all excited. This project is really important for our company, and then they disappear and are never seen again. Or even worse, they reprioritize the project or withdraw resources. So that leaves a team questioning, how important is this really for us? There are too many energy drains managers are putting in place, but it takes work to keep up the energy. And that takes us to the second condition. The second condition is what we've called creative friction. So complex adaptive systems work best if they can engage with creative friction. And that means the individual components interact dynamically and in a close range. So managers need to work to make sure they provide an environment that not only enables interaction and communication, but that encourages a close and intense, rich interaction and dialogue. So that means team members need to share ideas. They need to play off each other's thinking. They need to argue with each other. They need to come up with new ideas. And that's when you get the creative friction. Well, because the bowl was so cool, let me show you what that means with our bowl again. Where do you think you get more creative friction? If you have an interaction and communication environment like this, with some pretty similar people in there being close, maybe you have a couple other bowls and they are working together. Or you have an environment like this, where you add some color. You have a holistic, highly interdisciplinary, diverse team that's close together. They are bumping into each other. They help to go off into different directions where they would not have gone otherwise. That's when you get your creative friction. There is no friction without contact. You need to make sure there is close contact to get this friction going. So the most successful teams we have worked with, they reported all on a high intensity, high frequency of interaction and communication. They would talk and interact with each other multiple times a day, most of it face-to-face, but they also used diverse channels. They would use electronic or physical sharing platforms where they post up-to-date information, where they post their ideas, where they post issues. They also reported on a great balance between formal and informal meetings. It's equally important for the teams being able to walk over to a colleague's desk, and flush out an idea on a whiteboard. You also want them to have this random coffee maker, water cooler, and lunch conversations. They are equally important, if not more important, than the regular team meetings that give them a battle rhythm. So managers need to make sure they put these conditions in place. Wherever you have friction, you can also have heat. To deal with this heat, a high level of empathy was really important for all of these teams. Because only then, if you have a high level of empathy, you can benefit from your diverse team, where you can explore different perspectives, different opinions, and have really truly novel ideas. You also want to be able to resolve conflict in a productive way. And that's where you need empathy. That takes us to our third condition. They need to work as a complex adaptive system. So whenever an innovation team is ready to go after a new innovation opportunity, they are by definition heading into unknown, into uncharted territory. That means they don't know what to expect. The only thing that they know, the business plan probably is not going to work out. But that's okay. You need the plan, but you need to be ready and accept that the plan will shift. So how do you organize and coordinate for an effort like this? Complex adaptive systems, they don't have highly defined rigid structure. What they have is just enough structure. Just enough structure means they have enough structure so they can effectively collaborate and work together, but they have enough flexibility so they can react to new insights, to react to new learnings, to react to new challenges. They need a lot of freedom to move. And so what we have seen with our teams is just like this. You need your interdisciplinary, diverse team that allows them to tackle a broad set of challenges. You also need a small team because that allows them to move quickly. The goal is the common purpose, is the common goal. You need a set of parameters, you need a set of boundary conditions within which the team can work. They need to have freedom to make their own decisions so they can move to all the places in the innovation space. Unfortunately, that's not what we see very often with the large team. Let me show you what it looks like, what we see in many large organizations. So, in many large organizations, we have more a situation like this. This is when you have too much structure. So, what happens if I apply energy to it? Nothing is moving. It becomes really rigid. And of course, the other extreme would be to have no structure at all, which is not good either, because then everybody goes off into a different direction and they get lost in the wide problem and solution space. It's the leader's job to make sure these parameters are in place and they know where they are going. They need a certain direction. How large this bowl is, which shape this bowl has, that does not matter, but it needs to be there. And that takes us to our fourth and last condition that they need. And we call this excellence at experimentation. So now you have a highly energized team that's engaging with creative friction, and they also have just enough structure to tackle an innovation opportunity. This question remains, how do I search a wide open problem and solution space? And that's when it's important which tactics and strategies you are using, which methodologies are you using. Complex adaptive systems do this by using nature's most effective search algorithm. And this algorithm is variation, selection, retention. That means for innovation teams, very early on, they move into action, they start to produce a variety of mock-ups and prototypes, and that allows them to conduct a series of experiments. What's really sticking with our targeted customers? That not only allows them to make some ideas and words really tangible, that also allows them to flush out their assumptions and to test their hypotheses, and not only within the team, but ideally against the intended end user. Because only if you're working with the intended end user, you can select and retain the things that are really working for them. If teams do this well, they can quickly iterate from early on funky prototypes to later on high-fidelity prototypes that are very close, if not exactly like the end product. They are not doing this within a highly defined process. They use this set of tactics and strategies within a more flexible innovation framework. And that's a very big difference to what a lot of the existing mature firms are doing. All of these four conditions, taken for themselves, sound pretty simple and obvious. But here's the thing. All of them need to be in place. All of them need to work hand in hand, and that's what's difficult. Even if one of them is missing, or if one of them is weak, It highly reduces the team's ability to function and to work like a complex adaptive system. So managers very often make the mistake to work just on one or two of them. Well, innovation is not working. Oh, let's bring in this latest methodology everybody in Silicon Valley is using. It does not work like this. You can't take, for example, design thinking and plant it in a mechanistic environment. All the other conditions need to support these methodologies as well. And that's a mistake a lot of managers are making. So the bottom line is, leaders need to shift their perspective on innovation. They need to shift from the well-oiled machine to the ant colonies, because innovation is a highly complex and ambiguous task. In doing so, they can avoid some of these pitfalls, because very often they have the tendency to try and match the high complexity of the innovation task with an even more complicated innovation process. Linear dynamics working against nonlinear dynamics, and that does not work. That's treating innovation like a well-oiled machine. That's trying to control and manage innovation. But innovation is not a process. Innovation is an emergent outcome. And that's something to remember. Innovation is not a process. Innovation is an emergent outcome. So the best thing leaders can do is to try and create the conditions where innovation can thrive by learning from the ant colonies, by learning from complex adaptive systems. And that changes their job description into creating conditions where an innovation team can work like a complex adaptive system. So the good news is these conditions are relatively simple, but you need to work hard to put all of them in place, because then a team can absorb the high level of complexity of innovation through their interaction and through their behaviors, and not through a linear process. I like to call this simplexity, simple conditions for innovation teams to tackle the complex task of innovation. Thank you.